Well, shalom from Israel once again. My name is Ronny, and this will be another broadcast that will be divided into two. The first part will speak about what happens in the country during the last couple of days, fighting the coronavirus like the rest of the world. And then the second part, I would like to give an idea about what is Passover like in Israel and how this year it's going to be totally different than it was in any other year, maybe for the first time since biblical days. Families are going to celebrate the holiday, each family on its own, and not in public as it's usually being done. Keep in mind the Jewish world is focusing on the community. Everything we do, every celebration that we have, is always a large community gathering. And that was the purpose of Passover as well, except for the first one, and we'll speak about it a little later on. Every other evening or so, there was a press conference, and the Prime Minister is giving a statement, usually accompanied by the Director General of the Board of Health, and they try to give us an idea about what's going on, some new restrictions, and every now and then they come up with some news. We are still fighting the virus as the rest of the world. We lost 52 people or so to the coronavirus, but something strange happens. Since the whole country is mobilized to fight the virus, hospitals are only dedicating 20% of the resources to any other kind of patients. And we'll speak about life-threatening situations as well. And therefore, we may lose more people for cancer and heart conditions because nobody cares to treat them to the same extent as they fight the coronavirus. Has to be some kind of a fine line to decide where do you put your limited resources, and we are indeed limited. Ventilators, about 3,000 ventilators if we consider all of them, including some of the army equipment. And the biggest fear in the country is that we'll have more patients that need ventilation than the number of ventilators. As I understand, there's a crazy race around the world. Every country tries to get as much as possible or manufacture some of it in their own country, and that's what we try to do as well. So far, we have about 120 people that use those ventilators. We don't have enough beds for intensive care as well. And therefore, the lockdown is enforced now more strictly than it was so far, especially around the ultra-Orthodox towns and some neighborhoods in Jerusalem as well. There's a questionnaire that you are requested to fill up and mail every day. So the government or the authorities have a way to tell where are the main problems and how to quarantine a certain area and how to isolate it. And to do that by roadblocks, people need permits if they need to go to work because most people are not categorized as essential workers. And right now we're not supposed to leave the homes unless you go to the grocery, unless you go to get some food from the supermarkets, or you go to get some medical attention in the different clinics. We have about 8,000 people infected by the virus, and we have to say that the rate of infection slows down. It slows down not because we don't have enough statistics. Maybe the measure that we took for the last month begin to work, and maybe this is the most efficient way to fight the corona. Let me say a few words about Israel and what would it be usually to prepare for Passover and how it is going to change this year because of obvious circumstances. It's springtime. The country is beautiful. We're coming out from a long, very rich winter. The Sea of Galilee is full with water. The last time it happened was in 1991. The mountains of the desert are green and beautiful. It really makes you open the book of Isaiah 35 and read about the desert rejoicing, beautiful flowers everywhere. Water is flowing down the streams and the ravines. It's absolutely gorgeous. But in that season, that everybody would be out and will go to travel and enjoy the country and celebrate its beauty, we can. And therefore, we need to be staying at home and try to watch some news media because they can go out and give us at least a taste of how beautiful the country is like. In normal days, preparing for Passover, that would be the busiest time of the year. Especially in the ultra-Orthodox communities, not everybody celebrates Passover to the same extent. But for those that do, it's spring cleaning, as you would call it in your country. On top of that, you're going to prepare your dishes. They have to be purified in a certain way to be used for Passover. Everything made of terracotta and clay cannot be used because you cannot purify those things. You can only use objects like vessels and artifacts made of steel, made of glass, made of any other material, but not terracotta. You cannot purify terracotta. That's a Jewish purification laws understanding. And therefore you do that in large gatherings. Every neighborhood will have a big fireplace, and people will come to basically clean and to clean the dishes to prepare for the holiday. You need to make sure that absolutely no leavened stuff is found in your communities or in your homes. And that's what the Bible tells us clearly, not to be seen and not to exist. And the way to do that is by taking out all the leavened stuff that you collect from the house to a big fireplace. And every community does it together. And this is a highlight for the kids as well. But you have to make sure that by the time the holiday begins, and that will be this Wednesday, the country is clean of all this or prohibited material. But there is a national level as well. Since you cannot clean everything, supermarkets will quarantine their own leavened stuff, so nobody has access to that. And sometimes you understand you cannot totally clean the house well, because how can you make sure there's not a single breadcrumb that sank into a big carpet that you may have? And for that reason, in normal years, families will get together and will go to hotels that they can trust that they are kosher for Passover, and prefer not to deal with cleaning the house. They'll take the whole family for 8 days, but that's expensive, and spend the time in the hotel just to make sure that they are prepared for Passover. Once again, not everybody keeps the holiday to such an extent, but many people do. And therefore, it's all about the community. It's all about doing stuff together, and this year, for the first time, it's most likely not going to happen. They did this, in fact, even the Western Wall, amazing. Last couple of days, they used those materials to make sure that the Western Wall is disinfected, and this was done for the first time to the best of my knowledge. Also, twice a year, we are cleaning the prayer requests from the stones and gather them and bury them in the cemetery on the Mount of Olives. So once you write a prayer request and you stick it in a place in the wall, if you find such an available place, usually you can, you do know that this is not just a piece of paper. It's a piece of paper that will be treated with much respect, and everybody make sure that everything is collected and buried in the cemetery, and make room for another round of people that will write a prayer request. Twice a year we do that, in the beginning of the Jewish New Year's around September, and in Passover as well. So everything is ready for Passover in a way, and to make positive that nobody is infected, in this case by leavened stuff. Symbolically, the chief rabbi is collecting all the leavened stuff from the public places and sells it, a symbolic gesture, to an Israeli army officer, and therefore all the leavened stuff in the Jewish country is in the possession of a non-Jewish individual, and in that way I have to say that this is kind of a how shall we say that? Not just a man-made law, but kind of keeping and breaking the law at the same time. You need to understand that the Jewish world over the years developed a certain category of kosher as well. When the Bible speaks about kosher, it speaks about clean food. You go to the book of Leviticus, chapter 11, the whole specifications are there. It speaks about what animals and what fish and what birds are clean to eat. But over the years, the Jewish rabbis had developed a whole category of kosher that has to be kosher for Passover. There was a big debate in the Jewish world even today, what is forbidden to eat and what is legal to eat, because the Bible only speaks about not having yeast. The rest of it is all commentary. And therefore, the way that the Jewish holidays are celebrated, excluding Passover, is not exactly biblical. Back in the old days, the center celebration was in the temple area. The Seder meal was basically the Passover sacrifice as well, and everything happened on top of Temple Mount. Well, today there's no temple anymore, and therefore we cannot offer sacrifices because there's only one place to offer sacrifice, and that will be the temple. After Israel liberated East Jerusalem in the Six-Day War, and once again we have access to the Western Wall will be now the focal point to all the Passover celebrations. But again, this year will be very unusual. This year we're going to use the Zoom app, no doubt, to try to stay together with the families and celebrate together, but it won't be the same. There is some biblical justice maybe in what happens today, because the first Passover, if you go to Exodus chapter 12, Exodus 12 tells us very clearly that every family was supposed to celebrate in its own home, not to share with anybody else. They have to be dressed for the journey, and they had to do that and finish eating until dawn, because now they're going to leave Egypt. For the first time ever, and there is some interesting point here, the Jewish people are going to celebrate Passover as it was celebrated once and only once, and that was back in Egypt nearly 300 years ago, and it's interesting. Let me read it to you the way that the Bible tells us, and I'm reading now from Exodus 12:15. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on top and sides of the door frames, and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. It's so easy to identify today the destroyer as the coronavirus, and therefore while we are celebrating each family in its own private home for the first time ever, we're going to be doing something more biblical in a way than any other way of celebrating Passover in the Jewish world. A family by family, and not a large gathering, not a large celebration. That is what commanded in Exodus chapter 12. I do want to wish all of you a happy Resurrection Sunday. Please be safe, stay indoors, watch over yourselves, and may the God of Israel richly bless you. Thank you.